Hello, welcome. In today's class, we shall learn about pituitary gland. The term pitute means mucus. By ancient anatomists, it was thought that the nasal discharge, the mucus discharge, is from this gland. Indeed, pituitary is a misnomer, though it's widely used to name it. The correct terminology of this gland would be Hypophysis cerebri. That means the gland which is below the cerebral hemispheres. Before we begin the class, let us be clear about three concepts. The first one is neuron. It has cell body, axon and axonal end buttons. Let us understand the term exoplasmic flow. All the neurotransmitters which will get released at the axonal end buttons will be formed within the cell body. They travel along the axon within the plasma towards the axonal ends. So this flow is known as exoplasmic flow. The second point is portal vein. Usually veins begin at capillary beds. They coalesce to form larger and larger and finally move towards heart. Portal vein is the one which connects two capillary beds. This is an arterial end. This is capillary bed. Instead of forming different veins here, this vein is connecting one more capillary bed. Primary and secondary capillary beds are connected by an intermediate vein. This is called portal vein. In human body, we find portal veins in three different parts. One is the largest, hepatic portal vein. The second one, we find it in renal system, renal portal vein. And the third one, yes, we are looking at it today, that is between hypothalamus and pituitary gland. The third concept is about endocrine secretions. Endocrine secretions are ductless secretions. They pour their secretions endogenously into the blood. This picture shows how the secretions are directly entering the blood. Hormones are traveling through the vascular system and they are finally reaching their target cells. Let us look at the objectives for today's session. At first, I shall describe the external features of hypophysis cerebri. Later, I shall discuss the relations of hypophysis cerebri. Hypophysis cerebri is actually two-in-one structure. It has two distinct components. We shall emphasize on two distinct components with a note on its development. We'll enumerate the hormones secreted by pituitary gland. I will outline the vascularity of hypophysis cerebri, that is about its blood supply, and finally I will enlist the related applied anatomical aspects. Before we proceed to external features, let us look briefly at related osteology. The term sella turcica means Turkish saddle, the saddle used to sit on the horseback. This is cranial cavity showing anterior, middle and posterior cranial fossa in three different colors. This is middle cranial fossa. In the center of the middle cranial fossa, On the bone sphenoid, there is a concave depression that is known as sella turcica. In sagittal section of this bone, we can see sella turcica here, just above the sphenoid bone and above the sphenoid air sinus. On the dorsum of this sella turcica, we find a raised bony elevation that is dorsum sellae. Dorsum sellae can be seen here. This picture shows only the sphenoid bone, which is shown in green color here in the middle. This is sella turcica. This is dorsum sellae. If you imagine yourself sitting on this sella turcica, being a miniature human being, you can hang down your legs into these foramen lacerum, and you can easily bend forward to pass your hands into optic canal. They are here, and you can rest your back on the dorsum sellae. This is just for imagination and to make you understand. The gland pituitary is sitting in sella turcica. Let us look at in detail further. Let me describe the external features of hypophysis cerebri on this slide. One can observe the sagittal section of human head with brain in this picture. So let me zoom it. We can observe pituitary gland here connected with its stalk to the hypothalamus. This is located in a socket formed within the sphenoid bone in the middle cranial fossa, that is sella turcica. It is an exceedingly important ductless neuroglandular tissue. It is reddish gray in color in fresh tissues. It is of a pea-sized body, flattened oval in shape. These are its dimensions, and it weighs about half a gram. The connection to the brain by pituitary stalk proves that it is part of a nervous tissue. The superior surface of pituitary is covered by reflection of dura mater, that is diaphragm sella, which covers on sella turcica. But this diaphragm sella in the center has an opening which allows the pituitary stalk to pass through. We shall look at two different components of pituitary and how they are related to each other in a while. Let us discuss the relations of hypophysis cerebri. This picture shows the contents of cranial fossa. In the middle cranial fossa, in the center, we can see sella turcica occupied by pituitary gland. The superior surface of the pituitary gland is covered by diaphragm sella. It has a small opening through which pituitary stalk communicates to hypothalamus. This is coronal section. We can observe pituitary gland here, sphenoid air sinuses below, and on either sides cavernous sinuses. So this is the cavernous sinus, which is open to the lateral side, right lateral side of the pituitary. This is on the left. Laterally, pituitary is related to cavernous sinuses. Inferiorly, it is related to sphenoid air sinus. Superiorly, it is related to optic chiasma. These two are optic nerves joining, optic chiasma. We can see optic nerves taking entry inside the cranial cavity through optic foramen. This picture shows sagittal section. Posteriorly, pituitary is related to dorsum sella. Superiorly, optic chiasma and infundibular recess of third ventricle. We can also observe anterior and posterior to the pituitary stalk, there are intercavernous communications. They can be seen here as well. Conclude the relations. Superiorly, it is related to optic chiasma. Inferiorly, it is related to sphenoid air sinus. On either sides, it is related to cavernous sinus with its content. Posteriorly, it is related to dorsum sella. As I was mentioning, pituitary gland is two-in-one structure. Let us emphasize on two distinct components of hypophysis cerebri. Also, we will add a note on its development. This picture shows anterior and posterior pituitary. You can see it in two different color sections. Structurally, functionally, and developmentally, both these components are different. Anterior pituitary has pars tuberalis, pars intermedia, and pars distalis. This is pars distalis, most distal part. This is pars tuberalis, which extends on the pituitary stalk like a tube. Pars intermedia is inside. We shall look at it in a while. Posterior pituitary has infundibular stalk, this one, which is communicated above with hypothalamus, and lower expanded part, pars nervosa or pars posterior. In sagittal section of the gland, we can observe all these things again. Pars distalis, pars tuberalis, and there is a small mass of tissue which is between pars posterior and a cleft which is formed within the pars anterior, that is Rathke's pouch. Between this pouch and pars posterior we find pars intermedia. Both of these are developmentally from ectoderm. The yellow structure is from neurectoderm and pars anterior is from roof of the oral cavity or roof of the stomatodium, the surface ectoderm. Let us look at the development of hypophysis cerebri. This picture shows a surface ectoderm, that is roof of the oral cavity, roof of the stomatodium, and this is neurectoderm, the developing brain. The developing brain invaginates down towards the mesoderm in the form of infundibular process. At the same time, the ectoderm invaginates up in the form of Rathke's pouch. So in further development, Rathke's pouch completely gets detached from surface ectoderm of the oral cavity at its roof, and this forms pars anterior with Rathke's pouch inside, which goes very much approximated towards the infundibular process of developing brain. It is almost approaching the infundibular process, having three different components for the pars anterior. This is pars distalis, pars tuberalis towards the infundibulum, and pars intermedia, which is between the Rathke's pouch and pars posterior. This is developing sphenoid sinus within the mesoderm below the pituitary. This is completely developed gland. Like this, both these components are different in origin and even by function they are different. Let me enumerate the hormones secreted by pituitary gland in this slide. So we are looking at gland which has pars distalis, pars intermedia and pars nervora, anterior, intermediate and posterior parts of pituitary. These three parts have different hormones to secrete. Pars anterior secretes growth hormone, prolactin, adrenocorticotropic hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, follicular stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. Pars intermedia secretes melanin stimulating hormone. Pars posterior, being in direct communication with hypothalamus, has function of secreting vasopressin and oxytocin. I have shown hormones secreted by anterior pituitary in different colors. This is because growth hormone and prolactin are secreted by pink staining cells. They are acidophils. and rest of the hormones are secreted by blue staining cells or basophils. Acidophils and basophils can be seen in histological section of anterior pituitary. The details can be learnt in histology. Let me explain the blood supply of hypophysis cerebri in a simple way. Hypophysis cerebri is supplied by two arteries. One is superior hypophyseal artery, other is inferior. Both these arteries are branches of internal carotid artery. Once the arterial branches reach onto the gland, they form rich capillary plexus. As this is an endocrine gland, the secretions have to be poured into the bloodstream. It has several sets of veins which drain into the dural venous sinus, that is cavernous sinus. Let us look how posterior pituitary secretes oxytocin and vasopressin. As posterior pituitary is in direct communication with the nervous system, the axons are reaching till here. For example, axons from this group of nucleus and this group of nucleus are reaching all way down through the infundibulum into the posterior pituitary. Vasopressin and oxytocin in the same way are secreted by the neurons. They flow through the axoplasmic flow and they are stored into the axonal terminal buttons and they are released whenever there is need. The group of nucleus which is above the optic chiasma is supraoptic nucleus. This is the one which secretes vasopressin. The group of nucleus which is on the side of the third ventricle or paraventricular group of nucleus is the one which secretes oxytocin. With these colors, we can understand that vasopressin is never secreted by V, paraventricular, and oxytocin never by O, supraoptic. In the previous slide, we understood how posterior pituitary, which releases oxytocin and vasopressin, is in direct communication with central nervous system. Anterior pituitary has several hormones to secrete. This part of the gland is not in direct communication with central nervous system. This part of the gland is directly controlled by hypothalamus, that is by some release hormones like thyroid release hormone, corticotropic release hormone, growth hormone release hormone, gonadotropin release hormone, or inhibiting hormones like somatostatin. So all these hormones are secreted in hypothalamus. They should reach from hypothalamus to anterior pituitary as there is no direct nervous anatomical connection existing. Let us look at this blood supply again. This part of the hypothalamus, which has several neurons, which secretes these release or inhibiting hormones, and they will track down through exoplasmic flow up to this infundibulum. But there is no nervous communication from here to reach to this anterior part of the pituitary. So, nature has provided the capillary plexus of this region and of this region with a connection. This is hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. So this hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system makes a communication between hypothalamus and anterior pituitary for the action of these release hormones or inhibiting hormones on the pituitary gland. They have this channel so as to maintain the concentration of hormones reaching the anterior pituitary. Let me enlist related applied anatomical aspects of hypophysis cerebri. Pituitary tumors. Pituitary tumors are usually pituitary adenomas which will have pressure effects on the structures nearby. Most commonly it presses on the optic chiasma which may lead to bitemporal hemianopia. Intranasal transsphenoidal approach is one of the way to operate these pituitary tumors which is shown here. Sheehan's syndrome is a type of syndrome where postpartum necrosis of the pituitary gland sets in because of hypovolemic shock. This results in hypopituitarism. There are number of hormone-related pathologies: gigantism, acromegaly, dwarfism, diabetes insipidus, Cushing syndrome, so on. These are the links I have shared externally. This ends the class on gross anatomy of hypophysis cerebri. Thank you.